Before the story begins, what if the one who saved her didn't wear a cape, but had paws and a scarred past? Before you dive into this unforgettable journey, remember, like this video if you believe heroes come in all shapes and species. Share it with someone who understands that the strongest bonds don't need words. Comment if a dog has ever changed your life. And subscribe for more real stories that prove courage can walk on 4 legs. She shouldn't have been out there alone. The wind cut through the small town of Maple Hollow like a silent warning. 10-year-old Clara Dawson stood at the edge of the woods, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her red knit hat slipping slightly over one eye. She was supposed to be at home. Her mom thought she was. But Clara had a mission. Something had been calling her to the woods behind her house. Not a voice exactly, just a feeling. A tug in her chest, a whisper in her bones. And Clara had always been the kind of girl who listened to quiet things. With her notebook clutched under one arm and her flashlight flickering in the cold, she stepped into the trees. She wasn't scared of the dark. She wasn't scared of the silence. But maybe she should have been. Because something or someone was watching her from the shadows. Not a wild animal. Not a ghost. Something worse. And that's when a low, guttural growl broke the silence behind her. Clara froze, turned, and there he was. A massive German shepherd with eyes like storm clouds and a limp in his left leg. No collar, no leash, no hesitation. He stepped between her and the darkness, teeth bared, tail stiff, body braced for a fight. Clara didn't know his name yet, didn't know what he had survived, didn't know how many times he had been betrayed. But that night, in the middle of nowhere, he chose her, and nothing would ever be the same again. He wasn't born a hero. He was made into one through fire, loss, and loyalty. Before he became the silent shadow in Clara's life, the German shepherd had a name, Rex, and a purpose. He was born into the K-9 division of the state police, trained from the time he could walk to serve, protect, and obey. They heard screams from the second floor. A girl. Without thinking, Liam rushed inside. Rex followed. They found her barely breathing, trapped by flame. Liam passed the girl out the window to a fellow officer below, and that was the last time anyone saw him alive. The roof collapsed. Rex tried to go back in. He clawed and bit and howled, but they held him back. The girl survived, but Liam didn't. Rex was never the same. They said he stopped eating, stopped responding, that he refused reassignment, that he lay by Liam's uniform at night and barked at the front door every morning as if he still expected him to walk through it. Eventually, they retired him. No ceremony, no medals, just silence. And so, Rex disappeared, slipped away from the station, vanished from the records. Some said he ran into the forest near Liam's home. Others said he was searching for the one thing the fire didn't take, purpose. And now, years later, he had found something or someone that brought him back to life. A girl with too many questions, too much loneliness, and just enough light left in her to bring back his. He had been one of the best, swift, smart, and fearless. He could sniff out a single vial of narcotics in a warehouse full of chemicals. He could track a suspect through pouring rain and alleyways. But what made Rex truly exceptional was the bond he shared with his handler, Officer Liam Hayes. They were more than partners. They were family. Liam was a widower, raising his teenage son alone. And to that boy, Rex was a big brother. They did everything together: holidays, backyard games, even camping trips. But then came the night that changed everything. It was supposed to be routine, a break-in at a remote farmhouse, suspect likely armed. But the call came in too vague, too late. By the time Liam and Rex arrived, the building was already ablaze. Sometimes, all it takes is a single moment for two broken paths to collide and form a new one. It was just after 7 a.m. in the sleepy town of Briar Ridge when Clara Morgan's world began to shift. She was walking to school alone again. Head down, hoodie up, headphones in. She crossed the wooded shortcut by the old train yard. No one used it anymore, not since the last fire cleared half the trees. But Clara liked it there. The silence, the crunch of leaves underfoot. It was one of the few places where she didn't have to pretend. That's when she saw him. At first, it was just a rustle, then a shape, tall, still, watching. A German shepherd, partly hidden behind a burnt tree trunk. His fur was black and gray, dusted with ash. His ears perked, eyes locked on hers. Not aggressive, not timid, just alert. Clara froze. She wasn't scared exactly, but her heart beat louder in her ears. Her fingers tightened around her backpack straps. Then, slowly, the dog stepped into the clearing. He limped just slightly as if an old injury tugged at his stride. But his presence was powerful. He looked like something out of a dream, part ghost, part soldier. Clara took a step back. Dog didn't move. Then, with deliberate patience, he lay down. Right in front of her. Tail still. Head high, waiting. Clara didn't know why, but something inside her cracked like an old door creaking open. She didn't speak. She didn't run. She just sat down, a few feet away. They stayed like that until the sky turned gold. No words, no leash. No reason. Just something unspoken. She didn't know his name. He didn't need to ask hers. But somehow, both felt seen. At 10 years old, Clara was what some teachers called a quiet type, and what other kids called nothing at all. She'd moved here 3 months ago, after her father's sudden transfer. New town, new house, same aching loneliness. She missed her old home, her friends, her mom, who had passed just the year before. Everything felt unfamiliar and worse, unwelcoming. She didn't tell anyone about the dog, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how to explain what he'd given her. From that morning on, Clara took the same path, through the woods every single day, and every single day, the dog was there waiting. Sometimes, standing at attention like a sentry. He responded to hand gestures, and once, when she tripped over a root, he was at her side in a flash, nudging her gently back to her feet. Ash wasn't just a dog. He was trained, disciplined. Maybe you're military, maybe you're police. Whatever his past, it lingered behind his amber eyes, haunting but calm. They didn't play. They didn't chase sticks. Their bond wasn't childish. It was deeper. A quiet understanding between two beings who had both lost more than they could say. But something was off. Clara began noticing strange things. Twice she spotted the same white van parked just beyond the woods. Once, she swore she saw someone watching her. From behind the fence near the train yard. The man ducked away when she turned, but her skin tingled with the wrongness of it. Ash felt it too. He'd growl low and soft when the van was there. He'd position himself between her and the trees. Clara tried to ignore it, to tell herself it was nothing, until the day it wasn't. Other times already lying down in the exact spot he'd chosen. Always silent, always watching. Clara started calling him Ash, after the soot that still clung to his coat and the trees around them. She didn't know where he came from. There was no collar, no tag, no owner calling his name. But she knew he was someone's dog. He obeyed invisible rules. The moment she knew without a doubt that something was terribly wrong, it was a Thursday, windy. Cold enough that Clara had almost skipped her usual walk. But something pulled her there. Maybe it was routine. Maybe it was Ash. She stuffed her hands in her jacket pockets and headed into the woods. Ash wasn't in his usual spot. Her heart skipped. She called out softly, "Ash!" No bark, no rustle, just wind weaving through brittle branches. And then she saw it, lying on the ground, stained with something dark, her breath caught in her throat. She turned to run, but froze. A man stood ahead of her, unshaven, hoodie pulled tight, holding something, rope. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, voice slick like oil. Clara took a step back, and then another. The man moved toward her. She turned to bolt, and that's when the growl cut through the air. Low, primal, deadly. "Ash!" He erupted from the trees like a storm. No hesitation, no bark of warning. Just fury. The man barely had time to turn before Ash launched, jaws clamping down on the man's arm, dragging him to the ground with terrifying strength. Clara screamed but didn't run, because Ash wasn't just fighting, he was protecting. He was trained for this. The man struggled, cursed, tried to break free, but Ash held firm, pinning him until sirens wailed in the distance. The police arrived moments later, alerted by a neighbor who'd noticed the suspicious van and called it in. They pulled the man away, shouting in disbelief as they realized Ash was one of theirs, AK-9. Presumed missing months ago during a warehouse raid gone wrong. He'd disappeared after his handler had been shot. Everyone thought he'd run off, vanished. But he hadn't. He'd found someone else to protect. Someone who needed him, Clara. Footprints deep, heavy, not hers, not Ash's, to Set's. Leading into the brush, then disappearing behind the tree line near the old service shed. Her pulse began to race. She started backing away. But then something caught her eye. A red ribbon, her ribbon. The one she tied to Ash's collar 2 days ago. It was torn. The dust settles, but nothing is the same. The police took the man away in cuffs. His arm mangled but intact. He'd been wanted in connection with multiple abduction attempts in nearby towns. This time, he picked the wrong girl and the wrong dog. Behind them, Ash sat obediently by the police cruiser, tail thumping slowly, eyes never leaving Clara. One of the officers, a grizzled sergeant named Reed, approached and knelt beside the dog. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Ash." The German shepherd perked his ears, but stayed still. "I thought you were gone, buddy." Clara looked up, startled. "You know him?" Sergeant Reed nodded. "He was one of ours. Best damn tracking dog. On the force, he went missing the day his handler, Officer Garrett, was killed. We searched for weeks. Then the trail went cold." Clara stared at Ash, stunned. "He saved me." More than once, Reed patted Ash gently. "He's still doing his job, even after everything." There was silence. Then Clara whispered, "Does he have to go with you now?" Reed paused. "That's complicated." He stood and walked over to talk to the other officers. Leaving Clara and Ash together, she knelt beside him, resting her forehead against his. "I don't want to lose you too," she said softly. Ash licked her cheek, just once. By the time the sun set, the decision was made. Ash would be evaluated by the department, but the consensus was clear. He'd found a new home, and no one had the heart or the authority to take him away from Clara. The next day, reporters crowded the sidewalk, news vans, cameras, questions. Clara didn't care about the attention. She only wanted people to know one thing: this dog didn't just protect me. She told them, he chose me, and in doing so, he saved more than her life. He gave her courage. Clara sat in the back of the ambulance, a thermal blanket wrapped around her trembling shoulders. She wasn't hurt, but the fear hadn't worn off yet. Her mom arrived moments later, running so fast she almost slipped on the wet grass. She dropped to her knees and pulled Clara into her arms, sobbing into her daughter's wine-tangled hair. "You're safe, thank God. You're safe." Sometimes it's not just who you save, it's what you remember. The next morning, the house was quiet. Clara sat on the floor of her bedroom, brushing Ash's fur. He lay stretched out beside her, eyes closed, completely at peace. Inside were reports, photos, and a laminated ID badge with a younger Ash, sleek, alert, and standing proudly beside her father. Clara's breath caught. It was Ash. But what startled her more was what she found next: a note. Not official, just a folded scrap of paper written in her dad's careful, all capitals handwriting. "If anything happens to me," and Ash makes it out, he's not just a partner, he's family. He always knows who to protect. Gee. Her hands shook as she read it over and over. Ash lifted his head, ears perked. He nudged her hand gently. Clara looked at him through watery eyes. "You knew." He nuzzled her again, this time more firmly, like a reassurance. He had found her, not by chance, not randomly, but because he remembered her, from when she was just a baby, bouncing in her dad's arms at the precinct. From the scent she must have carried faint traces of her father's old jacket, her laugh. The family smell buried deep in Ash's instincts. He had remembered and come back. Clara didn't speak. She just buried her face in his neck and held on tight. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, but inside that quiet room, something more powerful stirred. Not memory, not duty, but something stronger. Home. But something about his calm made her think deeper. She pulled out her dad's old case box, the one he used to keep mementos from the police force. She remembered it mostly for the smell, leather, and dust, and a faint hint of coffee. Digging through it, she found an old folder marked K9 Garrett, final ops, in her dad's handwriting. "You don't choose family. Sometimes they find you." Later that week, Clara and Ash sat in a small office at the city council building. Across the desk, a woman from animal control tapped her pen, reading through the report. "So, you're saying the dog showed up with the girl's backpack in his mouth?" Clara nodded. "He led the fire crew right to me. I'd still be trapped if he hadn't." The woman pursed her lips, clearly unsure what to do with a story that sounded more like fiction than fact. "You understand, officially, Ash's retired canine property. Technically, the department owns him." Clara reached into her backpack and gently set down the laminated canine report. "My father was his handler." The woman glanced at the name, Officer Greg Monroe. She looked back at Clara. "You're his daughter?" Clara nodded. There was silence for a moment. Then the woman leaned back with a sigh. "This is highly irregular, but under Section 6A of the Retired Canine Transfer Protocol, immediate family can submit for adoption." Clara's eyes lit up. "You'll need to sign a release, complete a health assessment," and as she paused, "promise to give him a home." Clara didn't even blink. "He already has one." Ash wagged his tail beside her, sensing her excitement. The woman cracked a small smile. "Well, then, let's make it official." Clara signed every form, her hands shaking with a mix of nerves and joy as she wrote her name on the final page. Ash placed a paw on her lap, as if signing beside her. The woman stood and opened the door. "Welcome home, Officer Ash. And Clara, thank you for not giving up on him." Clara blinked back tears. "He never gave up on me." They walked out of the building, into the golden afternoon light. Girl and dog, partners in more ways than one, not bound by a leash or by law, but by something deeper. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't saving someone, it's staying when no one else does. The front door creaked open with a quiet groan. Clara stepped inside first, flipping on the light. The house still bore the marks of the firewalls stripped to studs, the ceiling patched, the smell of smoke faint, but lingering like a memory that hadn't yet faded. Ash patted in behind her, his claws tapping against the wooden floor. He sniffed once, then twice, before trotting confidently toward the living room. Clara watched him as he circled the space, pausing where the couch used to be, right where he had pulled her from the flames. She stood in the doorway, gripping her new house key like it was a badge of honor. The house had been rebuilt, yes, but it wasn't the walls or roof that made it feel whole again. It was him. Clara walked to the center of the room, dropped her backpack, and knelt beside Ash. "We're safe now," she whispered, running her fingers along his scarred ear. Ash leaned into her, sighing the way only dogs do when they finally let go of a burden they've carried too long. That night, Clara didn't sleep in her bed. She rolled out a sleeping bag on the floor next to Ash and fell asleep with one hand resting on his side. The moonlight spilled through the window, silvering the outlines of two quiet souls who had saved each other in more ways than one. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, a girl and her dog began again. A quiet kind of forever. They didn't speak the same language, but they understood each other better than anyone else ever had. The house was still. The storm had passed outside, and within. Clara sat on the back porch, knees tucked to her chest, her sketchbook resting on her lap. The pages were filled with drawings, some of flames, some of smoke, but most of Ash. His face in profile, his eyes, his paws, the way he curled beside her when she cried. Ash lay stretched beside her now, basking in the morning sun, his thick coat gleaming with health. His ears flicked lazily at buzzing flies, and the jagged scar above his brow had softened into something that made him look wise, rather than wounded. He wasn't chasing criminals anymore. He wasn't reliving the fire either. Now, he chased butterflies in the yard, watched birds from the windows, waited for Clara to come home from school every day, and met her with the same wag of his tail. As if each return was a miracle, neighbors began to recognize them, the quiet girl and the quiet dog. And slowly, Clara began to talk again. Not just to Ash, but to her mother, her teachers, herself. Her voice was still soft, careful, but it was there, like a match gently struck in the dark, refusing to go out. Ash never left her side. Not when she had nightmares and woke up screaming. Not when the anniversary of the fire came and made the world feel heavy again. Not when she stood in front of her class, trembling, and told them about the dog who saved her life. He stayed. In a world full of people who came and went, Ash chose to stay. And for Clara, that was the bravest, most heroic thing anyone had ever done.